this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The honourable member from Regina Capel.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, and Canadians are suffering through his inflation and high interest rates. For many families, the best hope for a summer vacation will be a modest road trip. Parents will sketch out a budget based on meals and hotels, and a big expense will be fuel. The GST, excise tax, and carbon tax have helped push fuel prices to near record levels, with many families unable to afford a vacation at all. Conservatives have proposed taking the tax off of gas and diesel for the summer, saving Canadians 35 cents a litre. Will the Prime Minister vote for our motion, or will he force more Canadians to stay home this summer?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, this is a prime cut of Conservative baloney. And I know what I'm talking about. My dad was a butcher, Mr. Speaker. The savings that the Conservative Party of Canada claims for Albertans is based on people travelling 37,000 kilometres during their holidays, Mr. Speaker. 37,000 kilometres. You can go from the North Pole to the South Pole, and you would have kilometres left to achieve the savings that they claim, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Regina Capel.
That's just not true, Mr. Speaker. And everybody knows that the carbon tax costs more than the rebate. That is why the Prime Minister was humiliated into granting a carve-out for just some people in some parts of the country. And that's all we're asking for today, a carve-out on federal taxes on fuel and diesel for the summer. For the average family in Ontario, that would mean almost $600 in savings. Now, to the Prime Minister and his wealthy friends, that might not seem like a lot of money, but to struggling Canadians, that could make the difference to be able to say yes to the kids when they ask for some summertime fun. So will the Prime Minister have an ounce of compassion and help more Canadian families afford a vacation?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know math is not the forte of the Conservative Party of Canada. Let me walk them through it. By their math, the Albertans would have to use 3,293 litres of gasoline over a 3-month period, Mr. Speaker. At an average of 8.9 litres per 100 kilometres, that equivalent to 37,000 kilometres. You would have to drive for 10 consecutive days, non-stop, Mr. Speaker. If you had 2 weeks vacation, you would have 2 days left, or maybe 3, to enjoy your vacation.
Member from Regina Capel.
I don't think math is the forte of someone who brags that he doesn't think about monetary policy and thinks that budgets balance themselves, Mr. Speaker. Maybe the reason why the Prime Minister is being so cruel about this issue is because he's long forgotten the thrill of the family road trip. You see, he has wealthy lobbyists who invite him to their private islands where he doesn't have to pay for the villas and he gets to stick taxpayers with the bill. But Canadian workers have to pay for all the inflation, all the interest rates, and all the tax hikes themselves. So will he have an ounce of compassion, take fuel taxes off for the summer so Canadians can have a road trip this year?
I'm going to ask all honourable members, please, to not take the floor unless they're recognized by the Speaker, so that all members and so the public at home can listen and hear the question and also hear the answers. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think Canadians' idea of summertime fun is being locked in a car for 10 straight days. I think their idea of summertime fun also isn't having their dental care taken away or taking away their diabetes medication, or that their summertime fun is losing child care, Mr. Speaker. Their definition of summertime fun, I think maybe they should have a conversation with kids about what they want to do with their summer. I think they care more about getting dental care and having good teeth than being locked in a car for 10 straight days.
The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
After 9 years, this Liberal NDP Prime Minister is not worth the hunger or homelessness as 1 in 4 Canadians skip meals. Edith is a single mom in my community that can't afford to feed her kids because this Prime Minister doubled groceries and gas. And his bright idea, he jacked up the carbon tax 23%. Common sense Conservatives are calling on him to axe all federal fuel taxes this summer to save average families $670. Will he vote with us, or does he want more families like Edith's to go hungry and broke?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, maybe I need to go through the math again to make sure that it is understood. The savings that the Conservative Party is claiming based on that assertion is based on the use of gasoline over the summertime of 3,293 liters of gasoline. Do the math. It's not complicated. At an average consumption of 8.9 liters per 100 kilometers, a family in Alberta would have to drive 37 kilometers to be able to benefit for those claimed savings, Mr. Speaker. This has nothing to do with reality. It would be nice for the Conservative Party of Canada to come down to earth and leave La La Land for a little while.
The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Well, Liberal math for that anti-Alberta minister says that jacking up the carbon tax 20% is somehow going to fix forest fires and reduce the...
I'm going to just ask the honourable member, start from the top again, and just to rephrase it slightly on that front. The honourable member from Calgary, Forest Lawn, from the top.
Liberal math says jacking up the carbon tax 23% is going to somehow magically fix forest fires and reduce the cost of groceries like that Edith can't afford. And they think we're gullible and incompetent like the NDP, that we'd blindly support policies that made 2 million Canadians go into a food bank in a single month and that made 1 in 4 Canadians skip meals. Why don't they do everyone a favor? Give Canadians a break and put them out and finally end their misery. Call a carbon tax election so common sense Conservatives can scrap the carbon tax scam and Canadians can kick this costly carbon tax coalition to the curb.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
There they go again, Mr. Speaker. They want to ruin the rebate for Canadians. A rebate that disproportionately impacts the middle class and lower-income Canadians working hard to join the middle class. I also noticed, Mr. Speaker, that throughout the past few weeks, they've been quoting from reports from Food Banks Canada, from Salvation Army, and those reports are important. We thank those organizations for those reports. What they point out are challenges faced by Canadians. In those recommendations, which they ignore, they point to programs that this government has continued to support, the Canada Child Benefit, for example, that they've voted against every single time.
The honourable member from Lethbridge.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal government is not worth the hunger and homelessness that it's causing so many Canadians across this country. Many Canadians just simply look forward to a small summer vacation, a road trip perhaps. It's normally a time where they can go and camp in the mountains or go to a national park or visit loved ones. But this year, many Canadians can't afford this simple delight because this government has made life too expensive. On Monday, this House will have the opportunity to vote on a common sense motion to save Canadians 35 cents per litre on gas. Will the Prime Minister vote with us, the common sense Conservatives, so that Canadians can afford a simple vacation, or will he force them to stay home?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, good news, kids. You can take a summer fun time vacation where you're locked in a car for 10 consecutive days, nonstop with no bathroom breaks, and the Conservatives have a plan for you to have that summertime fun. And the cost? Give up the future of the planet, right? Don't worry, kids, about climate change. Don't worry about taking action on the planet. Enjoy your 10 hours in the car and let the planet burn.
You would think it's Wednesday. The honourable member from Lethbridge.
Well, this out-of-touch Prime Minister might be able to take a $230,000 taxpayer-funded vacation to some fancy island, but that's not an option for most Canadians. In fact, most Canadians just simply want to be able to get in a car and drive a few kilometers to enjoy a national park or the mountains for the day. But that's even out of reach for so many of them because of this Liberal government's out-of-touch policies that are driving up the cost of everything. On Monday, this House will have the opportunity to vote on a very common-sense motion that would take the federal tax off of fuel. It would make life affordable for Canadians and allow them to enjoy their summer. Will the Prime Minister vote with us so that Canadians can afford a simple road trip, or will he force them to stay at home while he enjoys his luxury vacation?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, today we're having a lot of fun with figures because the Conservative AI machine suddenly kind of broke down and didn't quite supply them with the right math, and they do rely heavily on that for mathematics. I do note that that member fights against a regime that sends 8 out of 10 Albertans more money than they pay in. But she was a little sheepish, a little quiet, when her own Premier, Danielle Smith, hiked gas taxes 13 cents to fuel, increased government spending in Alberta. She didn't talk about that. I wonder why.
The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians know this Liberal Prime Minister, he's not worth the homelessness, he's not worth the hunger, and he's not worth the tent cities that are propping up everywhere. But there is a plan to give some relief. A Conservative motion will take the carbon tax and all federal taxes off gas from now until Labor Day. It will save 35 cents a litre and maybe give Canadians a road trip. The only road trip these Liberals know are their ministers driving around in their limousines with their chauffeurs. Will they support the motion to axe the tax, yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
That Conservative motion, Mr. Speaker, is written on the same napkin as their housing plan. The reality is that whenever it comes to serious issues of the day, all they have are slogans, Mr. Speaker, hollow slogans. What happened in the House of Commons yesterday? Every single party in this House, minus the Conservatives, voted against their initiative because it would tax home building, Mr. Speaker, and it says nothing about homelessness. Finally, Mr. Speaker, most of their caucus is made up of rural members. Do they know that that housing plan only applies to a certain number of cities, not to the entire country, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
It's unbelievable. This would save 35 cents a litre in gasoline. Now, it doesn't mean much to ministers who get driven around by chauffeurs in their limos who probably haven't pumped gas and know the cost of gas in about 10 years. But for the average Canadian family, it will mean everything. And they could actually do something about it. I know they don't take road trips, but actual Canadian families do, and it will make a difference. And they've got a choice. They can vote to actually take those taxes off, save Canadians 35 cents a litre so they can take a road trip, or they continue to punish Canadians with this damn carbon tax.
Just going to ask members to be very careful about the use of language in the House. The Honourable Minister for Families and Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives want to talk about numbers today, so let's talk about a few of those numbers. 4, the number of consecutive months that we've seen inflation decrease in this country. 750,000, the number of families benefiting from our affordable early learning and childcare. 1.3 million, the number of Canadians that have been lifted out of poverty with our policies. 400,000, the number of kids that will receive access to food at school. This is what our government is doing on this side of the House. Why won't the Conservatives get on side and support Canadians?
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, and Canadians are fleeing Canada, moving south in record numbers, tens of thousands, the highest number in 10 years, escaping this Prime Minister's economic ruin, fleeing so they can afford to live, afford to buy a home, and stop paying for this government's bloat. This is an inconvenient truth from the Prime Minister's very own media machine, the CBC, this morning. So how many more Canadians have to leave their country before the Prime Minister realizes that his government is just not worth the cost?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, there it is, Mr. Speaker. I wondered when they continually put down our country who they want us to be and what they want to emulate. Now we know that they prefer to have a United States model, for example, of health care. Well, I can tell you I was down south a couple of months ago with my partner where an individual fell over. And when they came conscious after I called 911, their concern wasn't their health. Their concern was money. That they didn't have the money for the care. I don't want to live in that country. And on this side, we will fight for public health care. We will fight against the cuts the Conservatives want to bring to our health care system. And we will make sure that every Canadian gets access to the care they need.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
The plan is actually driving Canadians out of this country in droves. More than 126,000 Canadians left to go stateside in 2022. That's a 71% increase from the year before. Doctors, nurses, mechanics, young Canadians with university degrees, don't they get why they're leaving? His policies, the Prime Minister's policies, are hurting them. When will the Prime Minister realize that Canadians are just not that into him?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, families like mine chose to come to Canada from places that were difficult, where there were challenges. Canadians are proud of the country that we have. Conservatives keep talking this country down. There are people around the world, Mr. Speaker, that would choose to come to this country, that are choosing to come to this country every single day for freedom, for the capacity to be who they are, to love who they love, to be proud of their traditions, and to be able to do it in this country. We have health care. We have the things that Canadians and all those around the world are desperately seeking. We will keep fighting for that on this side of the House while they keep talking this country down.
The honourable member from Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, Canadians know just how unaffordable life has become, and the facts speak for themselves. They are so glaringly obvious, even the CBC of all places is covering the record surge of Canadians moving to the United States. 126,000 Canadians moved to the U.S. in 2022 alone, a 70% increase in the last decade. There are Facebook groups, some as big as 55,000 each, that are finding ways and sharing tips on how to move out of Canada. If things are so great, why are a record number of Canadians moving to the United States then?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, while we're talking about the United States, let's just take a moment to reflect what women in that country are going through. A lack of access to reproductive choice, Mr. Speaker. I read an article in the New York Times yesterday, Mr. Speaker, about the number of women that are dying because they can't access abortion care in their states, Mr. Speaker. That's the kind of future that these Conservatives want for Canadian women, and we'll fight for their freedom.